Check, check. All right, I want to do a quick recording because I haven't updated. Um, it has been a significant few days and weeks, honestly. Um, we've made a lot of progress on the goals that we had originally set out in terms of technological innovation when we started the company and the stream and everything else. And when I first started this, I had mentioned that there would be two possible paths of how this would go forward. One of them being private sector with the company and pushing the technology and selling it or working with an organization on it. And the other would be working with, government sponsored teams or, subcontractors that were, somewhat aligned and kind of push as a asset that could be used in the future to work on this stuff, as well as introducing our own new concepts. And it turns out we are defending the fall in theory, and it seems like the path that ended up working out was the latter, the government side. And it hasn't for sure happened yet, but there's a opportunity that's lined up for me to work here at BNL, and it would require getting a clearance and doing all of the stuff. And it's very well aligned with not just the technology that we had conceptualized and wanted to work on, but also the stuff that we've been doing already and demonstrating our skills in already. And if we are able to get that lined up, then it also will provide the opportunity to have the credentials needed to keep pushing with these other technologies and these other things that we're contributing to. And so it's starting to seem like we are making a maybe temporary or permanent switch into some more defense focused projects, whilst using this as an opportunity to finish and close out all of these other things that we've started that we would have had to just put down and run away from in order to start a postdoc or some other job. So, with that being said, it's also really perfect timing. If you saw the Golden Dome, discussions, we are refactoring some of our work in order to align with these interests. And I think if I do a good job of networking and connecting all of these sparse things, we can really present ourselves as a leader in not just these efforts, but any future effort at a large scale that involves one of these groundbreaking technologies, one of these new nation things, and also continuing to connect and justify a lot of the investment going into things like data centers and so on. So this is like as perfect as it could be in terms of, demonstrating myself in these several different ways and being recognized for that hard work, and then people talking to other people, and here it is. Like, we have a potential way of an official, paycheck for possibly even 5 years to contribute to this stuff. And we have probably three proposals coming up that are relevant that also could get funded. And I'm really hoping that if we work really hard on the core gaps that we've identified, the latent space problem, the domain translation, and the integrated knowledge network, then the stuff that I can't talk about will very well align. And at some point, there'll be this meshing that perfectly addresses the needs of not just this administration, but decades of defense and reconnaissance vulnerabilities. So, I was just talking to a viewer about the challenge of matching overly techno optimistic, fairy tales with what the technology can actually do. And I want to be that gap between the guy that shares in that optimism and that ultra futuristic look of this stuff, but also works on the nitty gritty and understands the building blocks enough to paint a really, really long term future proof plan for how we can get there. I want to be the guy hyping it while also, pulling in the people that are skeptical and painting for them a end to end plan. And I'm so close to not just having that full plan together, but also each organization, each expert, each asset, and possibly even now the funding. So if this all works out, the stream is going to change. And, this is something that I had kind of primed people for. But, obviously I'm not going to be doing co-working when we're working on classified programs, where if we're going into the office, we're not going to be bringing cameras. So that kind of stuff is going to change. But if we have the time, that means we can also finish building this and the robotic arm and the stream computer and the Mars yard and the gantry and the other gantry and all those things that we had intended to set up for when this time came. Good and bad news, I guess, depending on how much you give a shit about what I do. This is good news to me. It's not quite how, if I were to write a comic book on the origin story of how we got to this point, it wouldn't quite necessarily be the most interesting, but it's definitely the most effective. So if things start to seem different over the coming years, if, you have taken the opportunity to come by my full-time office hours and you see it kind of shift from what it was originally advertised as, that's why. But if you've been following along with all of the interest areas and the research that I've been doing, then you should be excited for the idea that the government is open to the idea, and they are concurrently investing in aligned stuff. And I potentially have a foot in the door to be seen as a leader in this. And that could be great for, not just the more niche defense space reconnaissance interests of this technology, but also the more open education, shared science, and kind of the paradigm shift that we were talking about over a year and a half ago that could come from having experience creating fully integrated knowledge networks, using universal latent encoding spaces to do domain translation for whatever kind of data set it might be. So one of the main technology interest areas that I can work on personally to be able to bring to the table is going to be working on the universal latent space encoding, working on, doing multimodality without curating specific, modal domain transfers. And one simple thing is just universal headers, the idea that we can, take all these different data sets and without having to go and line up the headers and do all of the manual curation, we can train something to do that. So those are kind of the three things that aren't directly related, that aren't directly, redacted and such, that, I'll be working on the side. But once they reach a certain point, I could put this onto a package to each of these organizations separately and say, this is the picture of each of the state of the art. This is how we can connect it. This is how this asset could be useful for you. This is how this asset could be useful for you. And on the side, this is how, for the sake of secure information, this is how the U.S. government could use this. We're close. We're really close. But, everything I was looking for in the last year in this unsteady time was just enough to make rent so that I could have 5 years is great, 2 to 5 years to just, continue to work on it and network and hopefully, be that person that is referenced for this stuff. But yeah, proposal's still due in about 9 days. We have a lot of work to retune it to kind of fit this broader goal. After that, MPS2, Indium replacements for Parsec, and we're going to be running the ablation studies once we finish the attention visualizations for UV-C-GON. I'm taking on a new project in modeling the Hapke equation, or might take on. We'll see if I can learn anything in the next few weeks to add to it. And yeah, we keep on trudging along. It's good news, and it means that the shit show that is this lab might be for some good reason one day instead of just being packed up and moved once again. Oh yeah, the RF stuff, no progress there. I'm waiting to hear back from the union, hopefully, on whether or not they're proportion that, or whether or not their purported rule that I'm not allowed to know the facts is true, I'm gonna fucking make fun of them for it if it is. And yeah, I think I'm gonna keep pushing on that, especially now if I feel like I'm secure in knowing that the U.S. government likes me as an asset. Um, I feel more comfortable like pressing on the organizations that's giving me barely 1/4 of a livable wage, um, and sort of helping address that problem on the side. But I honestly can't do anything more until potentially we have that question answered, and maybe even we get a lawyer and all that other stuff figured out. So no progress there, but you know, I am making my own path here, and it's going well. Cheers.